Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, everyone. This is Rob Gauthier, and tonight we are doing the Density Masterclass. Now, this evening was supposed to be a channeled event with George Farakis as co-host and running switchboards and everything, and then I was going to talk to everyone for a little bit and then go into a channeled state and do that, but we didn't have that chance or opportunity to do that tonight. Unfortunately, George had something that popped up last minute, and he had to go. And it's, well, you know, it's appreciated, understood, George, we all love you. And we will be doing the 422 session very soon. As soon as he gets back, we're going to sit down and have a powwow, and we'll get a date hammered out for you. But this evening, we're doing the Density Master Class. Now, this is going to be all the information that I've learned from Treb about densities, dimensions, higher frequency entities, all of these things, and we will be taking calls too a little bit later. First of all, I'm going to go through a little bit of explanation of who I am, a little bit of history with Treb. Those who don't know, for those who do, be patient, and we'll get the good stuff here in a little bit. After I get a chance to share some of the information I have, and some of it's quite in-depth and detailed, then I'm really, really going to be excited to take anyone's calls. You guys can call now, too, and stay on hold if you want. That won't matter to me either way. But my name's Rob Gauthier, and what I am is I am a channeler. And for those of you who don't understand what channeling is basically where you're able to go into either a deep trance meditative state or an awake state and connect to other entities. And an entity is another soul, another being. And the way you connect to them is on a non-physical level. So what this is a mixture of two consciousnesses. Thank you. And you mix your consciousness with another entity's consciousness, what you get is a channeled message. Basically, the way Treb comes through me is that he and his race, a reptilian hybrid race from Capella, doesn't have a spoken language, and I only speak English. So what he does is his soul mixes with mine. I allow him to enter my body. He mixes my English language with his understanding of universal laws, in-depth knowledge, personal, vibrational, and energetic readings for other people, and he'll take that information and put it through my throat chakra system, which is an energetic system that runs through your body to be able to share information with other people. And I've learned how to do this around 2 years ago. I'm getting better and better at it now, and that's what channeling is. Now, I'll explain to you how I met Treb. This is a little bit of a story, and it starts back as a child. Coming up in a Christian family, I was raised with a family that had a lot of religion. It was a very huge thing in our life to be religious. My dad was a deacon on the board. He ran the bus ministry. Literally, he would go and scoop up all the people in the neighborhood to bring them to church every Sunday and every Wednesday. And it wasn't a small church either. It was a huge church, so it was a really big part of my family's life. And growing up, I don't remember a time when I wasn't in church until my later teenage years, but we'll get to that in a minute. Basically, through this whole time, I learned God is God. I learned Jesus is God. I learned Holy Spirit is God, and I learned that everything else is below them. I learned that you must serve him by his rules, his regulations, in order to have a free pass that's called heaven. And I learned that if I didn't get in God's good grace or Jesus' good grace, that I would be damned for eternity. I would be in hell, and there was no way that I could ever get back. And that always sounded a little suspicious to me. I always said, how could a God who loves you enough to give you life, who loves the world and loves you unconditionally, be able to sentence you to a death like that? It always blew my mind when that was talked about. So I go a little bit further, and as I reach about 8 years old, I had this experience. I'm sleeping, getting ready to go to sleep. I'm laying down to go to sleep, and all of a sudden, I hear this thing coming into my room, and I turn around. It wasn't so much that I heard like loud noise. It was quiet noise, but I felt it more than I heard it. And I turn around and I look, and this is the grandmother of mine. It was my mom's grandmother, so it was actually my great-grandmother. She had died 20 years before I was ever born. I have seen pictures of her from everywhere. I knew exactly who it was, and I said, what are you doing here? And she explained, I'm your great-grandmother. And I said, well, why are you here? She talked to me about my mom, about how she was doing fine. There was a lot of problems in my mom's family life as a child. Her family was very, I won't say dysfunctional because there's no such thing as dysfunctional. I would just say it was off-centered. No one got along. Everyone really hated each other, was mad at each other for something or another. And she wanted me to tell my mom that it's okay to patch these things up. Now, I talked to my mom about it the next morning, and she was touched. There was a lot of things that she knew. I had no way of knowing, no idea of how to know that. So I could see it touched her, but deep down it frightened her. This goes against everything you're taught. When you die, you go to heaven or hell. You don't exist. And that's what she told me. You go to heaven or hell. You don't just hang around on earth. You don't do these things. And that was a really deep impact in my life. I remember that. It was so real. And I always thought to myself, how could I have been sleeping? How could this have been a dream? So I kept on that for a long time. As I get older, I go to church. And these people would say something, and all of a sudden something would go, whoop, that doesn't sound right. So I'd step back and I'd say, how is this possible now? Now, I've heard you go to heaven and hell. Now you're talking about these resting areas, and I'm talking about this. Now you're talking about that. I've seen so many contradictions. I was like, what is, I would ask the pastor, what's going on with contradiction? And they would always give me this long excuse and how we have to trust the Bible and trust this and trust that. We have to that's the number one answer you always get in church. That's why they call it faith. I got tired of that real quick. I really did. So I let go of that. Pretty soon it got to the age where I was about 13. And little did I know up until recently that this was a big turning point in my life energetically. 13 is when I started going down the wrong road. I started doing a lot of negative things, a lot of bad things, hanging out with the wrong people, doing really, really off-centered, really bad stuff. But I didn't realize why. And more recently, I found out. Right before I turned 13, me and a friend, my friend Scott, who I love dearly, still my dear friend, like a brother to me, and another friend were driving around the country, and we seen this UFO, and it was pretty close. It was the closest one to this day. I have never seen one more detailed and close than that. I looked at it, and it scared me. It shook me to the bone. And it really kind of messed me up. But sooner or later, I forgot, days later, we talked about it, but it stick in my mind. It was just a real sharp, energetic punch to myself. And that always stuck with me. So then we move on. I'm going down. I'm getting a little more worse. I spent my whole teenager years to be a hellion. I spent it doing whatever I could to just be as negative or as, in my opinion, at that time I was having fun, so it really wasn't nothing negative. It was just a blast. Then I kept going, kept doing what I had to do to feel good, to feel happy, to feel full. And the more I did, the more I would disconnect myself. Well, time came around, and finally I got out of the teenage years. I met my wife now. I met her when she was 14, or when she was 15 and I was 14. We spent a lot of time together, but sooner or later, obviously, we ended up getting pregnant. I was 18 when she got pregnant. She was 19, and we had our son when I was 19. And this changed my life. It made, for those of you who don't know about my son, he has cerebral palsy, severely handicapped. Right now he's 14. He can't, he needs to be changed, he needs to be fed, he can't walk, can't talk. So it's what most people call severely handicapped. And there's a lot of things I could talk about that, but we'll get to those points maybe later tonight, maybe at another point. But either way, it made me straighten up. I became a dad. I finally seen someone in my life who meant more to me than I meant to myself. I finally seen someone in my life who was more important than I was. I'd always loved my girlfriend, wife at the time. I always thought she was real special, but I never could put all of her needs and wants above my own. It was just built into me. I couldn't do it. I spent so long being disconnected, it was impossible. And I finally see this perfect being, this one I fell in love with instantly, and now I can give my life to him. So I did, and I stayed straight for about 2 years. I got away from all the people, except Scott's been the only one who's been through it all with me, and as I progress, he does too. And you know, he was chilling out at that time of his life too. So everybody but him, I left or didn't hang out with. I didn't associate with. And all of a sudden, he gets to be about 2 years old. And when he's 2 years old, we just really start seeing the depth of his problems. We understand that. When we took him home from the hospital, they said, well, he has these little seizures and he needs medicine for it. And that's all they told us. We had no idea. We seen the benchmarks that he was supposed to get. You know, a certain amount of months you're supposed to sit up. At a certain amount of months you're supposed to hold your neck up by yourself. And all these marks he was missing. And then when he was about 1.5, we took him to a specialist. And they laid it on us. They told us everything that was going on with him. And it crushed me. It broke my heart. I felt so guilty for that. And I know I didn't have anything to do with it, but I felt guilty. I felt bad for him. I looked at it and said, oh, my God, my son is not going to have this life where he can get married and have kids and run around and do all these fun things. And I really did. I felt so bad for him. And then that's when the depression started. About 2 years old, dealing with them. I was a very active father. I did everything for him, still do. Still to this day, I do everything I can for him, lifting, feeding, diapers, everything. Literally, I can do for him, I do. And it was the same way back then. And I got pretty depressed, so I got disconnected. And that disconnection lasted for so long. Seems like it was 8 years, maybe 6 years. It was really bad, really deep. It started off as just minor disconnections, started drinking on the weekends with friends, stuff like that. And it progressed, and I got worse, and I got more disconnected, and I got more depressed, and it just kept going that way for so long. And then finally, I don't know why, I don't know what, I don't know how, but I jumped out of this horrible, deep depression. And then I credit it for the love of people around me, the people who stuck with me through the hard times. Their love's what got me through it. I used their love because I didn't have any for myself. That's how I looked at it a couple of years after I got out of it. So I kept going, and I kept going. And I started connecting to myself, started really feeling at one with things. I would see animals for what they are. Like, I loved them. I just felt like they were a huge part of my life. Nature was beautiful again. I looked at trees, and I could just sit there for hours looking at trees. It's funny. About a summer after I started connecting with myself, I started learning the names of trees and plants. And that was so fun for me. It was so wonderful. I always was so excited to have that opportunity. So I was going through naming everything, finding all the names. Just everything sunk in with me. It was wonderful, and I loved it. And I kept going through things like that. And finally, you know, I started to be a little more at peace with myself, but I still had the anxiousness, the anxiety. So I started learning about meditation. And to tell you the truth, to this day, I don't know what made me think of it, what guided me to it. I started like light meditations, like just closing my eyes and relaxing my body. And I wanted to find a church that had these similar beliefs. I wanted to learn and go deeper. You know, I always believed that there was a God. I just didn't believe it was the one represented to me as a child. So I stayed there, and I went on the internet and looked, and I found this church that's about 60 miles north of where I live. And it's called a Spiritualism Church or Spiritualist Church. Just really depends on what part of the world you are. They're really big in Europe, and they've got a place in America. Actually, their headquarters is in New York. It's called Lilydale. And if you ever get a chance to see about psychic mediums, if that's something that interests you, there's a HBO special program called something in Lilydale. I can't remember now. That's going to kill me until I remember it. But if you type in Lilydale HBO special in Google, you'll find it. It's very, very wonderful documentary about those spiritualists and what they believe there and how they connect to spirit. But it was the closest thing I'd ever found to what I believed. You know, I believed that he didn't die. I believed that you die, your soul goes somewhere on earth, and I never knew if it was heaven or hell, but I knew you didn't just go there. I knew you got hung around a little bit, and that there's proof of that. as a child, I used to watch these shows on TV about ghosts and spirits and all these things, and then I got older and I started watching them again, and then they had science involved with it, and I love that. Now this is not just a guess. This isn't just a maybe. This is science, ladies and gentlemen. We have proof that ghosts exist, and people can call it what they want, but in my mind at that time, that was proof for me. So it made sense, and I kept going. Excuse me for a second while I take a drink here. So I keep going to this church. I went a couple times. First time I went, I never told the guy who I met online, who was one of the people in the church. I never told him about my son. I never told him about anything really in my life besides I was looking for a church, wanted to check it out, wanted to see what it was all about. And he told me to come in early. They have a pre-ceremony or pre-service meditation, and then they do the service, and then you have a chance to get a reading before the service starts, then service, and then a post-meeting for meditation too. And I went. The first meditation was nice. The pre-meeting was great. I call them sessions now, but they were just little things where they have the preacher or a pastor, whatever title they give them. He's usually the head psychic or intuitive there. And he gave me a reading, and it was spot on. Talked about my son, talked about some family members that my dad had generations back. My dad is a real huge thing. He's a real big person on genealogy and past life, past history for our family tree and family lineage. He's huge in that. So he looked back and found this situation. I said, I don't know what this is about. It was about a Native American lady who had been in a war with a lot of people, and he found that in our family history. So it was amazing. They said this lady was around me all the time. It was just amazing. So either way, it was spot on, perfect. I loved it. I enjoyed it. And then I said, this is beautiful. That was so right on. I wish I could do this. And the guy tells me you can do it through meditation. And then, so we go through the service, do the meditation, kept coming back, kept meditating and learning. And after a few months, I started getting these little flashes and pictures, intuitions, whatever you want to call them, little sparks here and there. And I asked him, is this real or is this my imagination? And he told me a very important thing at that time. He told that you have to trust that. You have to trust it. Let's say it's not real, but you trust that it is real. Okay? Even if that's not really going to hurt you as long as it doesn't. As long as you're not being emotionally guided around by this information, it's not going to kill you. And for then, it teaches you. If you just accept it as truth, it teaches you by default self-appreciation. It teaches you to respect and accept your intuition for what it is. So it was a very useful tool, and I did. And I became better at it. I started getting vocal messages. I started getting picture messages. I started getting lots of different kinds of communication that way, and I loved it. I progressed, and I did it for months, but I hit a plateau. I couldn't go nowhere else. At that time, I had left the church by then. I still stayed in communication with them. It's really odd that a religion doesn't have that's why I liked it at first. It was a bunch of open people, free thinkers, open-minded people, but they didn't have a real religious thing, and that's kind of what I wanted. I wanted to see what the laws and regulations of afterlife, all these things were, and no one had answers because half of them didn't even agree that reincarnation exists. Half of them think you come here once and then your soul's eternal. And to me, that didn't make sense, but, it was a valid argument. And they couldn't agree on that. So I said, this church, I didn't like religion anyway. I didn't like organization, but I wanted to have information that I could put as solid. So I left there. I kept the communication with a lot of them, and I started doing my own meditations. On the internet, I found HemiSync, Gateway Experience. It was beautiful. I did it. I did it for 4 months, and it's a 6-wave thing with 6 waves in each one. So that's 36 altogether. And I went through them in 4 months, and that was way too quick. I would suggest anyone who ever tries them only go 8 months. I went through them way too quick. But my intuition, my connection, ability to channel my energy through my body, like chakra system manipulation, energy manipulation, became intense. I got really good at it real quick. And I did that for quite a while, probably 4, 5, 6 months. And one night I got disconnected again. Something came up. I don't know what it was, but I watched this video and I seen the Hubble Deep Field. And I stare at that. And I always had that feeling. As a kid, I loved astronomy. Always did. I'd always look up at the sky. And I just wished I could be out there. I knew what was out there. At least I thought I did, because I had read in science class about all these planets and stars and all these beautiful, beautiful things. And I never really knew how bad that bothered me until I got out of this disconnection. And then all of a sudden that want to be there was so intense it became painful. And that was a problem for me. And that's what disconnected me that night at that time. And I got real upset. I cried for about an hour. I just couldn't shake it. Well, maybe a half hour or so, but it was pretty bad. And after I came down, I said, I'm going to center myself. I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to get into my deep spot. And I have been trying to break. Through the hemisync, there's this 21 state. And this 21 state is complete consciousness, connection, ability to take your energy and put it out there. And what I did is I said, I've been trying to, for the last few weeks, to go beyond that. So that night I did. I finally reached my beyond 21 state, as I call it now. And that's when I met Treb. Now, it's a very interesting story, and I've told it publicly before about my exact situation with Treb. I'll make it the short version tonight, because we've got a lot of information to cover, and we've only got about an hour and a half left to do it. So basically, I went to an astral projected state, which is my consciousness leaving my body, but everything seems real. I could tell it wasn't 100% real, but it was almost as real as anything I had experienced in meditation before. One previous time I had this past life experience, and that was more real than this, but that was the only thing that had been more real than this. And I was sitting there, and I'm looking around. I'm in like this silver room. Everything's silver. There's a bunch of hologram, computerized things, switches, levers, little knobs everywhere. And I'm thinking, what the heck is this? And I look at this language. I don't know what the language is. It's just a bunch of shapes. And I kept staring at it because I knew it was important. It was really big and it was close to me. And I'm looking and I keep staring at it. And the more I stare at it, the more it turns into English. And it's hard to explain because it didn't morph, it didn't turn. Just the easier I could understand it. And then it started looking like it was English once I started understanding it. And I know that doesn't make sense, but that's what I experienced. And as it turns into English, basically the idea of it was, please sit here and wait, someone will be with you soon, something like that. And I remember, how odd is that? I felt like I was in some futuristic doctor appointment, waiting for the doctor to come in. It was not what I expected to have as my first breakthrough experience. And then Treb walks in, and he is a huge, huge entity, huge. He's massive, he's wide, he's tall, he's green, he's got sharp teeth, he's got really big eyes. And my heart just kind of froze for a second. I had this fear, and it only lasted for a second. And then he gives me an expression on his face, and it wasn't even an expression. This is why it's hard to understand. When you're in the astral projected state, it's just like your dream state. Like in your dream state, you could look at a house and say, this is the house of my great-grandmother's cousin's uncle brother. You don't know how you know that. You just do. That's the extrasensory. That's the consciousness gathering information automatically for you like it would in telepathy. So it's something that's very hard to explain unless you experience it. And I look at him, and he gives me this energetic smile. Once that happened, my fear vanished. I felt this overwhelming, huge energy, and it was love. And it was more than I had ever felt in my life. I talked to him, asked him who he was, what he wanted, what was going on with me. He told me he's a part of me. He didn't say it in that way. He said that he was connected to me in some way. He said that he wanted me to teach me about reality if I was willing, because everything I thought I understood about life and reality and the way things work, it wasn't really that way. And it interested me, and I visited him several times with him. The first time I met him, I waited 3 days after that. And you got to understand, at this point in my life, I was meditating at least 4 or 5 hours a day. Usually it was 2 to 3 times a day, meditating, like deep meditative states for 45 minutes to an hour. Plus, whenever I didn't need my physical eyes, they were closed. I was feeling energy around me. So I'm going from meditating 6, 7 hours a day to nothing for 3 days, and I couldn't handle it no more. I said, I got to go back in. I got to see what this is about. I got to see if I can make it do it again. And I did, and I did. After a few times, he talked to me, told me to talk to my friend Scott, and I did. And he told me not to tell him about him. And Scott was talking, me and Scott have always been interested in UFOs, things like that as children. But he showed me this video that had UFO, but it wasn't all about UFOs. It had this thing about channel material at the end, and that's what caught my interest, the channel material. And they started talking about, like, densities, dimensions, stuff like that, law of one, and then Seth material, and I jumped on that Seth material. For some reason, they were talking about the law of one, but the Seth material was a secondary note, and that's what I grabbed onto. I think because of my beliefs back then, if I would have jumped on that law of one, it would have weirded me out too much. It wouldn't have made as much sense. I needed Seth to break me in because Seth was a human entity, one that I was already aware you could connect to humans. And I think I just had that realization as we speak. I'm very flattered in myself for that, and I think that's why I was led to Seth first. That's brilliant. All right. And I build on my relationship with Treb. We talked for 2 years every day, astral projected state, sometimes more than once a day for 2 years. And at the end I said, you know what? I want to share this information. I didn't have confidence in myself. I didn't think that people would listen to me if it was just me. So I asked Treb, can I channel you so you can tell them? I want you to explain this because, I understood new terminologies, new things, but I knew a lot back then, but I don't know near as much as I do now. But even if I would have, I wouldn't have had confidence in myself at that time. That's something that's came since my direct physical connection to Treb. And 3 years later, and here's where we're at. What I'm going to do now, I'm done with that introduction story. I'm going to take a 2-minute break, and then we're going to start getting into the Density Masterclass. So if everyone is willing to hold on for 2 minutes, take a stretch, use the restroom if you got to, grab a drink, and we'll be right back, and we'll start talking about that in about 2 minutes. Thank you, guys. All right, everybody. I'm back there. Let me double check something to make sure everyone can still hear me as I'm going. Yeah, I think we are good. All right. As long as I'm not muted, I'm good. That's all that matters. All right, perfect. All right, so let's get into the Density Masterclass. Now, this is going to be some very advanced information. Some of you know a lot about it, some of you don't. This is all that I've learned. This is something that I hold dear to my heart. It's a speciality of mine of sorts. And the way this came to be comes with a backstory as well, but it's not a very long backstory. Back when I first started channeling Treb, probably my 13th or 14th public session, I can't remember, I'll give it a guesstimation around there, he had offered me that this higher density entity was coming in, almost like he was swinging through town and he only had a one-day show. And he was connecting to it, and through that connection, he offered to connect to as many entities as wanted to connect to him while he connected to this being, so he could get good, solid, straight information. I said, wow, that's wonderful. I was a little apprehensive because I'd never connected to anyone but Treb at that time. Basically, what Treb told me is that this entity was either a 10th or 11th density being. I think it was 11th density, which means non-physically this entity is huge. It's the consciousness of an entire universe. Or at least a large galaxy. If it was 10th, it was galaxy, but I believe he said it was a parallel universe to ours, and it was connecting to our universe, and that information would be available. Later on, I found out how Treb connected through Aridif, who connected to 8th density, who connected on up, and that's how the information was connected to. But he said, this is a one-time thing. You want it or you don't, go ahead and I'll connect you. Make sure you're safe, make sure everything, because I always worried about my safety, all that stuff, when I dealt with new beings. And I said, okay, that's great, let's do it. And I did, and I couldn't get a hold of Treb for 3 days for some reason. Every time I tried to connect to him, there was no pickup on the other line. It's like he wasn't home, wasn't answering his phone. And all of you know me, you see me, I get on there, I breathe a little, I ohm a little, I breathe some more, and then Treb comes in, and then it's connected. And there's a lot of thought process, intentions, symbolisms and stuff that I use in my own head to connect to him. But it's a pretty easy process. I've done it for a long time, and I couldn't do it. And finally, on the 3rd day, I connected, and boom, I connected to him. And I talked to him, and then this other entity came in, and this entity was huge. I experienced Treb differently when I channel. I usually talk to him, but this time was different. It was literally like I was jamming hundreds of thousands of images and videos in my head at a time. And this happened for the whole half hour, 40 minutes I was connected to this being. And for 3 days after I connected to this entity, I couldn't talk to anyone. Like, my brain was so scrambled, my mind was going 1,000 miles an hour. I couldn't focus on anything. I kept getting these visions, even when I was awake, when I wasn't sleeping. Things would pop in my head like lightning, like a movie. It's like taking a movie clip, but instead of things that are going in a row that match, that make a nice story, it was just a bunch of randomness. And that's how I experienced my life for the next 3 days. But out of that came the ability in myself, the opening of energetic pathways to connect to Treb better. And instantly my connection with Treb got better, and instantly the information started flowing out. And that's when the density information started coming through really good. Okay, so that's a little story that I had to explain about how I got into this density thing so much. I was interested, what is an 11th density entity? What's a 10th density entity? I have heard that there's different densities. And this is one thing I want to add too. A lot of people say, we've heard density informations from Vashta. We've heard them from Law of One. We've heard them from Treb. We've heard them from, a million other ones, Jesus, Sananda, and all these different entities that people are connected to. Why are they all different? Why do they each tell us something different? Well, there's a reason. That's because each entity's perspective is giving us their own races or their own personal view, scene, information, and knowledge about what densities are. Now, there's 2 types of densities, and even with Treb and Aridif, the ones who I've connected to the most, the ones who I've brought most information from forth, have different views. Treb looks at 13 densities. He looks at 12 physical densities, or 6 physical densities, 6 non-physical densities, plus God himself, or creator, or the one, altogether. That's the 13. Now, when you ask Aridif, he says that there's 3 physical densities and 2 or 3 non-physical densities. 2 or 3 non-physical densities. So it's really different when you ask each of them. And what I found out is the reason why it's so different. Treb is looking at consciousness densities. It is also broken up in harmonic levels. It is also broken up into the evolution of a soul and the steps and processes that we go through. But it's still different for every race. Every race has a separate perspective. The way Aridif looks at it is he's looking at harmonic levels only. Well, let's first explain, what is a density? What's a dimension? Okay? For those of you who don't really understand the concept, densities and dimensions often go hand in hand. They're usually a synonym for each other, for most people. But when you ask Treb, and all the information I'm giving you tonight has come from either Treb or Aridif, and I always put it to Treb's definitions or explanations. Even if I'm using Aridif's information, I'll integrate it into Treb's 13-step system, because that's what I know best. That's what I'm most comfortable with. So everything you hear tonight about densities will definitely be from Capellan entity. They've been playfully labeled as the Yit, or Treb Bor Yit NE's race. That's the information that will be coming through tonight. That's the information that I'm very, very aware of. And I think it is a beautiful thing. I really love the complexities of this information. So, what's a density? What's a dimension? They're the same thing. But when you ask Treb, what's a density, what's a dimension, he'll tell you. A dimension is space. It's space. It's width, depth, height, time. When you get into higher dimensions, time's considered one of them. After you leave the third dimension, you add time to the fourth dimension. And the fifth dimension is the capability of being fluid in time. So you got first dimension height, then width, then depth, then time in the fourth dimension, and then in the fifth dimension you have fluidity of time, where time no longer lays linear in a line. It becomes fluid. You can do with it what you will. Time is a coordinate instead of a spot on a line. Instead of a mark along one line, it's a coordinate within the time-space variable. Now, what's a density? And again, definitions will vary, but for Treb, what a density is, it is a level of consciousness, it's a level of matter resonance, it's a measure of vibration, and it's a measure of evolution of the soul. All of these things are considered when Treb talks about densities. Now, when you look at densities, there are 6 physical densities, like I said, and one above it is the 7th. That is where Oversoul goes. But let me not jump ahead of myself. The reason I told you that is because there's also 7 chakras in the physical human body, or at least the ones that most people agree with, that understand. And those do coincide with each other. And this is a beautiful thing. The first density, this is the elemental things. And think about your first chakra. It's all base. It's the base of life. It's being comfortable and living. It's all the basis of your existence, as is the elementals. And in these elementals, it includes things like molecules of water, electricity, minerals, rock. Anything on our earth that you would consider to be non-living is a first density entity. Now, this consciousness is so much smaller than ours. Every consciousness, and this is important about the first density, everything in every other density must be made by the first density entity. They are the basis of consciousness as it is. They are the building blocks of everything. They have literally hundreds of trillions of incarnations in one incarnation cycle. And it varies by oversoul consciousness, but we'll get into that too. The second density is plants and animals. This is even bacteria. This is anything that we think to be living, single-celled amoebas, all the way up to sophisticated animals. Now, second density has many attributes, but let's correlate that back to the chakra again. What's the second chakra? It's the sexual. It's the reproducing. It's the ability to multiply without using chemical reactions. It's multiplying from consciousness just like the second density. You're being able to do that, and that's how it correlates. And when we run through the first 7 chakras, I will correlate each one to the chakras to try to show you how this evolution. Everyone always says, well, what is it? Is it this or is it that? Did we evolve or were we put here by the intelligent entities? It's both. It's all of it. There's so many truths that we can find just by understanding this information right here. And it doesn't have to be limited by anything. It can be literally part of everything. You can make any correlation you want to it, and it's a valid correlation. And that's what's so beautiful about it. The existence of a second density entity. What is this? The second density entity survives. It lives. It goes on instinct. And it has an evolution, just as every other density does, just as every incarnation cycle, it has an evolution. Now, Treb always described to me, when you think of these densities, think about your incarnation cycle. You are an Earth being. You're an entity from Earth. You're Earthian, or Earthelmite, whatever you want to call it. We're from Earth, and we we have started our incarnation, this incarnation cycle on Earth. So when we were first density entities in our evolution, and we still are because we're made of first density, and we still have parts of first density in our oversoul, otherwise we wouldn't have this so-called non-living material around us. But either way, the first part of our cycle was to be molecules of water, electricity, water, fire, rock, stone, minerals. And that's what our Earth is. If you look at the way that our scientists tell us Earth evolves, and I know that's not the way it completely happened, but Treb said they do have a good grasp about planet formation, all that stuff. So if we listen to that, we can make the correlation. First density entities. And then what happens? After the Earth goes through chemical change and lightning and proteins start building, we get these one-celled entities, these bacteria. A lot of bacteria was brought from comets too. It's very, it's been confirmed too by Treb before. A lot of bacteria comes from comets, asteroids, from outer space. Early in our Earth, we had a so-called heavy bombardment period where we were just getting nailed with everything. And that's before human life was thought of being on this place. And that's where we did get a lot of bacteria. So the bacteria mixes. It adapts to the atmosphere. It gets all these things. And then the plants come out of that. You know, little life turns into big life, evolution. So there is really evolution. There is an evolution not only of our physical selves, but of the soul too. Now, attributes of second density, we've already kind of covered a few of those. But second density is an existence. And there's a lot of attributes they have where they're more in touch with their surroundings than humans are. Obviously, humans are mental, we're logical, we do all these things, but we're not in touch with the entities around us. We can walk into an ecosystem and completely destroy it or change it so badly other life can adapt, but animals can walk into any ecosystem as long as it's a part of their evolution. They can always adapt. The ecosystem changes with them. It doesn't kill or destroy things. So they're really intact with who they are. They're natural. You know animals. If you've got a pet, you know exactly how honest they are. They are who they are, and they are part of the overall system. Now, I'm not going to take a break every time I need a drink, so bear with me here while I take my drink. Now we move to the third density. We're all really, really aware of this. Some of us are still there. All of us are bouncing back and forth from time to time. This is the prototypical pre-December 21st, 2012 human being. We've all been through this third density cycle for a whole life, so you know it better than anyone. It correlates perfectly with the third chakra, the solar plexus, going back and forward in the time, relationships. All of these things are being built in the third chakra as well as third density. Now, all these three are in one area at one time. They're all in one harmonic level. Now, what a harmonic level is? The harmonic level is the physicality of a thing. Everything you can see and touch, everything you can experience is on the same harmonic level with you. Even if it vibrates a lot lower than you or a lot higher than you, it's within a spectrum that you can perceive. That is one harmonic level. This is also what some people call dimension. One harmonic level is a dimension. Some people say there's 64 dimensions, there's 32 dimensions, 17. And what they mean is harmonic levels. So a higher dimension to them would be a higher harmonic level when we're talking about densities and dimensions. And this is why Aridif breaks into three, because there are three harmonic levels. But again, we're not just talking about harmonic levels, we're talking about evolutions of soul, we're talking about vibration, matter, resonance, consciousness, evolution of the soul. So it's broken down differently. Now, animals, first and second density entities, they have a very smooth cycle of incarnation. Once the first density incarnation happens, and that incarnation is ended, let's say a drop of water becomes evaporated, or it becomes hydrogen and oxygen, or a water molecule in the air, whatever the chemical state is, it changes them into different. So that life is over. They instantly incarnate into something else. There's no wait for reincarnation. Animals are a little different. They do have different incarnation times. Before they reincarnate, they usually have anywhere from a couple months to a couple years in between each life, just depending on what animal, what level they're on, what problems they dealt with. Because even if you wouldn't consider it, animals still go through same issues. You've got animals that are highly imbalanced and ones that are really put together and that do what they're supposed to do and do as their normal animalist ways would have them do. So we do have that balance there. And there's a difference not only from the difference in each animal, but also different animal races or different animal beings. You know, its incarnation averages are different between dogs and cats. They're different between horses and dogs. They're different between elephants and horses. So each one of them are having different reincarnation cycles. Obviously, I don't know all those. It would take probably forever to find it. And humans. Most of us hear about humans, but we don't really understand basically what a human is for reincarnation. This also varies. And humans, it varies much more drastically than any of the other before it. Humans can spend literally a couple months out of body, a couple weeks out of body, and then they go back into the incarnation cycle, or they could spend a couple thousand years. There are some entities who have died in such horrible disconnection that they stay in that afterlife system. And that's another thing. I could literally do a whole show about afterlife. There's a lot of depth that goes in there. But basically, the afterlife, as we all understand it to be, is something that shows us more about ourselves. It lets us evaluate what we have done in our life. It lets us set up a new existence, and it also lets us learn those things we can't learn on the earthly basis. Not that we can't, but most of us do not, and most of us don't think to do. So that's the afterlife. And like I said, it can range from any amount of time to hundreds to thousands years. And then, where do they go? This is the question that we always get asked. Where do we go for incarnation? Well, when you're looking at a first density entity, it doesn't reincarnate, goes straight back into incarnation, so there is no level. But where do plants and animals go? Well, even though we share the first, second, third density, that's all one harmonic level, there are still energetic levels. But the animals go in a very similar plane that we do, and most of the time on the same plane, but sometimes there's a variation. It just depends on the animal, the consciousness, and also the human's consciousness. But they're in between the third and fourth density, there's called a go zone. And I do have this beautiful graph. If you want to follow me with it, you can go into Google and type in inwardquest.com. That's INWARDQUEST, inwardquest.com, and then type in moving from third to fourth density. And there's a question that'll pop up. It says, are we moving from third to fourth density reality now? Or are we moving from the third to fourth density reality now? That's the name of the question on the website. If you go down, obviously my username on InwardQuest is Treb Bor Yit NE. I put this wonderful graph that one of my friends, Jacques Bordeaux, gave me. He made it for me. It's beautiful. And all this information can be followed simply, too. There's a really good excerpt. If you go to Aridif, type in Treb and Aridif in YouTube, and the video with Aridif and Treb's face pops up. That is an excerpt from the book that me and Jefferson Biscardi did, and it has all the information that Aridif gives about densities and dimensions, and it's a lot more simple than what we're going through tonight, but it's still very, very worthy. It's very good to have. And for those of you who want to see, it's a free download book. You can get it if you go to my website, www.trebchanneling.com. You can go to the little book part, or you can click on Look at the Books, and the Benevolent Hybrid Reptilian Human book that I did with Jefferson Biscardi. That's a beautiful book, and it is in, I thought I had the chapter right here, but I guess not. But either way, if you read that book, it's towards the end, the message from Aridif. You'll definitely have that, and you can follow the graph at Inward Quest. So for all of you who want to know about more of that information, obviously it's there. You just got to look for it a little bit. But all right, so to continue on, this ghost zone is a vibrational level that's between the third and fourth density. It's like a low astral state for us. That's where we go when we die. That's where we go when we sleep. The same place. It's in between the third and fourth density. Now, let's start on the fourth density. The fourth density, let's first correlate. Well, let's not correlate. Let's say what the fourth density is first. It is a mastery of love. Plain and simple. And it gets, we'll get into the splitting of negative and positive here in a second, but plain and simple, it's a mastery of love. This is on a higher harmonic level than the first through third density. These entities, if they're standing right next to you, you can't see them. You might be able to feel them, you might be able to perceive them, but you can't see them because the molecules that their body is made up of is on a higher vibrational spectrum than what you could perceive. Even in their physical bodies are just as physical as ours, but it's less physical to us. We can't see them. We can't experience them that way. They literally have to do a technique where they manifest themselves into our densities. This is how we experience all ETs. Another interesting fact, between third and fourth, Treb had said that almost no races from third density ever get to leave their planet. That's why humans have never been able to go out of their solar system. There is very few exceptions, and one of them is pretty interesting. It has to do with Earth too, but we don't have enough time to go into that, obviously. I don't know enough about that, honestly, to go into it in depth, but very, very interesting fact. So this is a higher vibrational frequency. It's a higher harmonic level. And this is the mastery of love. Let's correlate it again back to the chakra system. What's the fourth chakra? It's your heart. What does your heart do in the chakra system it loves? It's perfect. It correlates. It matches. It's the same thing. Now, there's two ways to go in this fourth density. There's what some people have dubbed it the fourth density positive and the fourth density negative. But basically, in the fourth density, you're mastering yourself. You're mastering your ability to love. Now, this means you have to be a part of a collective in which that happens in. So what happens is the Earth split into two parts. That's what it started doing in December. It had been starting before then, but 21st is where it truly broke apart, where the scales are tipped in one way or the other. And we jump back from fourth to third sometimes now, getting experience of both divinity and complete and utter disconnected monkey minds, like my friend calls it. We have both of those. But pretty soon, in a 9-year cycle before the 21st, it started spreading apart. And a 9-year cycle after the 21st, it's continuing. Once that 9-year cycle comes over, your path is chose. You either are going to be a fourth density negative or a fourth density positive. And let's redefine negative and positive, because most of you understand there is no real negative or positive. That's why Treb always calls them type 1 and type 2 entities. Instead of negative and positive, there is no real negative and positive. But let's explore both those avenues. A type 1 entity is one that most people say are positive. It loves the whole. It understands it's part of the whole. Its actions reflect that of being to the benefit of the whole. It knows that when it does something for one, it helps all. When it does something for all, it helps one. It lives in that mindset. It also looks above them energetically in higher densities for, not just information, but also inspiration. That's the word I'm trying to think of. Inspiration, information, and it looks below them to give that information and inspiration to the ones below them as the higher do for them. They're part of all. They understand that. They will never do anything to break your free will. This is a type 1 entity. Type 2 is just the opposite. it sees itself as only part of a system, it sees itself as a part of a group, or it sees itself completely separate from everything. It can't see the wholeness. Even ones that are close to that, there are entities who are type 2 who will tell you, we are one with all. But when they say, well, why don't you help this person? Oh, well, yeah, forget that person. I'm not helping them out. They're our enemies. You know, so even though they have the philosophy, they don't have it down. And Treb always says, not all type 2 entities are bad. There are a lot of them that are loving and good entities that are very, very helpful to humanity, but the way that they do it infringes on the free will. But this goes all the way to really malevolent entities too, really negative, nasty ones. But they're all the same thing in that level. They're all classified the same. Now, basically, it only looks below them. It only looks at densities that are below them. Let's say it's a negative 6 density entity, it will look only below them. It won't look upwards to 7th density. It only looks at the 5th, 4th, because it knows that there's nothing that the higher densities can give them. They can only hand down their own rules, their own way that they want others to behave. They want to give their thoughts of what's right and wrong to the ones below them and never be challenged on that. Either that or manipulate them outright, depending on which kind, you know, either a nicer or not so nice one. This is the difference. And everything above the 3rd density carries this type of polarity, I guess. So, well, it's not a polarity in its actuality, but in the whole density. It's either one way or the other. It's nothing in between. You're either a type 1 or type 2. Obviously, type 2's definition is much more wide, has a lot more give than type 1 does, but either way. So as we live these next 9 years, we jump back and forth to whatever type being we want. And this doesn't get, I mean, at the end of the 9 years, don't freak out. If you're, 60% trying to do what you can for everyone, and then 40%, you're still more positive than you are negative. It's an experience. It's an evolution. We're never set in stone by the way of how much we can move, but we're always set on a path. From that point out, we're either a negative or a positive entity in that 4th density. And don't worry, after death, you can choose whatever experience you want after that. So it's never, like I said, it's never a set in stone thing. It's just the way of that perceived entity's probable future to be. So a lot of people get worried about negative, positive, 4th, 5th, 6th, all this. That's something you should never worry about. Okay, now we went through 1st through 4th. After the 4th, when the 4th density entity dies, again, it's a physical body, it must die, it must reincarnate. Where does it go? It goes in between the 5th and the 4th density, the same ghost zone like we're talking about. It's a level that's above the harmonic level of the people around them, so they can't experience them, they can't see them, but they're able to learn and tap into higher parts of their own soul. This higher version is what we often come in contact with in between life. And we'll get into this when we get into the 7th density. 5th density. Again, another harmonic level higher than 4th density. So now we have had 3 harmonic levels just between 1st and 5th. Okay? And the 5th density is where Treb lives. That's where he and his race live as a type 1 or positive 5th density entity. Now, just as in the mastery of love in the 4th, and that's the thing I wanted to explain too about the 4th, it's a learning of unconditional love. When you are finished with the 4th density, you will unconditionally love, regardless of what happens. If you're a type 1 entity, you will love unconditionally all that is. If you're a type 2, you will love yourself unconditionally. So either way, it's a mastery of love. Both paths, both have the same value. They're both experiences for the soul. Neither one of them is right or wrong, but they're both 2 separate paths. One is for yourself, one is for the collective. And that's the difference between type 1. Now let's go to 5th. What does 5th do? This is the mastery of wisdom. It's the mastery of light. When you hear Treb say love and light, what he means is love and wisdom. Right now, Treb's whole experience is a fifth density entity, is to gain universal wisdom, is to gain every part of wisdom that he can in this galaxy. And then when they move to 6, it's a little different, but everything in this galaxy will be known to Treb by the time he's done with the fifth density incarnation cycle. Now, obviously, this isn't his only fifth density life, and it won't be his only fifth density life. He'll have many times in fifth density. And this will be the mastery of wisdom. Now, how do we look at that? Also going into negative and positive. This is the mastery of wisdom for the use of one, or oneness, I should say, or the use of one group, one person, one part. Now, there are a little bit of attributes. We'll talk about the higher densities, the 4th, 5th, and 6th. I'll revisit that here in a second. Let's go to the 6th and what it means. Also, wisdom. You go into the throat chakra. That's the 5th chakra. So you're lining right up. Now, what is the 6th density? It's the mastery of love and light combined. It's the mastery to be able to love everything that you have come to have knowledge about and combine them flawlessly. This is the last stop before you hit non-physical state. Also goes in 2 ways. One of a mastery of love and wisdom for yourself or for your group or for your separate part, or one for all that is. Now, Aridif comes from the 6th density. Now, this is where it gets a little odd. 1st through 3rd density, 1 harmonic level. 4th density, 1 harmonic level. The 5th density is different from the rest. Now, how is there only 3 harmonic levels when the 4th and 5th? Obviously, 5th and 6th densities can't see each other, right? They don't experience each other. When Treb stands next to Aridif, Aridif has to come down to him, just like Treb would have to come down to us physically if we wanted. So how does that work? Well, the 5th and 6th are on the same harmonic level, but there's a difference in the way that the molecules are. When you have a 5th density and a 6th density entity, they are in the same harmonic level, but the angular rotation of the buildup of the particles in their whole environment, and we're not talking about just their physical body, we're talking about planets, we're talking about stars. They are rotating in different angular momentum so that one can experience each other. Let's give an example. Let's say that this particle and everything in the 5th density rotates at a 33-degree reverse angle, and the other one rotates the opposite way at a 45-degree angle. They can no longer experience each other in that density. Because the matter is so less dense there, just the angle and the rotation span on those particles can separate their entire realities. And I know it's hard to understand. I know it's a little difficult for those of you who might not understand physics, or even who do understand physics but don't understand the physics of the higher densities. But this is how it's explained to me. They are just different angles of different particles rotating opposite ways. And this is why 5th and 6th density can be on the same harmonic level, but they can't experience each other. And it's really odd, really weird. But when you look at 1st through 6th densities, those are the rest. That's all the physical realities we have here, 1st through 6th. There are huge differences in each one from consciousness. Treb gave us example a long time ago. And basically you say that there's hundreds of millions, trillions of incarnations as 1st density entities. On the 2nd density entities, and obviously this isn't the same with all oversouls, but it is just an example. Plants and animals, you get hundreds of thousands of incarnations. Human incarnation, 3rd density, you get 500. 4th density, you get 100. So literally, it takes 5 human consciousness at the end of the 3rd density to get 1/4 density's consciousness. That's how much more consciousness you have on average at the end of your 4th density graduation. It's almost 5 times more consciousness at the end of 4th. Now, what about 4th to 5th? That's even bigger jump. That's another 5 times. That's actually exactly the same jump, 5 times. Now, what about when you go to 5th to 6th? That's a little bit lower of a jump. It's 4 times the amount of the 5th density. So in each density, as we evolve from life to life to life, your consciousness is being added, and that's what we're going through right now. The 3rd to 4th density exam, or exchange, as Treb calls it, that is actually our soul gaining more consciousness. Well, how do we get that consciousness? What level does all these souls come from? That's where we get into the 7th density. This is where the oversoul resides. Now, excuse me, there are 2 parts to the 7th density, and now from everything I'm talking about from now on out is non-physical. And when I say it manifests itself physically, what I mean is it is a non-physical being, but when we see it in our reality, it manifests itself as this thing. The very beginning of the 7th density is where our oversoul level is. Our oversoul is the sum of all fractals, all 1st through 6th density beings that are in our oversoul. So let's say we get 5 incarnations as a 6th density being, like Treb gave an example, 20 of the 5th, 100 of the 4th, 500 of the 3rd, 100,000 of the 2nd, and several hundred millions and trillions of incarnations of 1st. Every fractal of all of those combined into one, that's the oversoul. It's all experienced as one. And that's the difference, too, from 4th density to 6th density. There's a difference in the way time is experienced. The higher the density, the less restrictive time is. Now, let's go back real quick again, too, because this is something else as I revisit 4th and 6th. I want to give you what a basic experience is for these entities. We know what 1st through 3rd is. We've lived them. 4th density entities, they live through love. Their goal is love. Their daily life is love. They're less physical than us. But every life, the more into a full 4th density life you get, the quicker they're able to manifest things. There's never a true instantaneous manifestation of the 4th density's existence. There's what me and you and all of us consider instant manifestation. Yes, maybe that. Maybe within an hour, maybe within a week, maybe within a day. Yes. But instant, that doesn't come till the 5th. And the 5th is less physical. The 5th is about looking for wisdom. So what happens? They all start off on the negatives. Something weird about the 5th density. The negative entities usually start on their own guide for wisdom. When they go to the 5th density, most of them start in their own realities, trying to find that singularly, not just with their race or their group, but they are individually going from that 4th to 5th. That's just something that was really interesting about that. But the 5th positives, they're doing the same thing. They're going through, they're gaining collective consciousness. It's less physical. That's where instant manifestation is from. The 6th density, these guys' consciousness is so big, they don't need a spaceship to travel. They don't need conscious. Like 4th density is about mostly technology with some consciousness integrated. 5th density, they're able to integrate their consciousness with their technology fully. Like Treb, like you've heard Bashar, a lot of entities put their soul into this machinery to help integrate it, not just because they want it to work better, be more connected to them, but literally because they're manifesting it from nothing. That's a 5th density. 6th density is so powerful. They are not bound to this galaxy. Each galaxy is a separate entity. We'll talk about that in a minute. They go from place. The 6th density beings travel all across the universe. They stay usually within their home galaxy or around it, but they can travel instantly from one place to another without a spacecraft. They don't need any machinery, technology. They're so powerful in their amount of energy they have, they can instantly bend time-space around themselves and instantly travel anywhere, millions of light years away instantly. 5th density can go from point A to point B instantly within our galaxy and also with the help of machinery. 4th density can't. There's a lot of really cool things like that that I was going to cover, but I'm seeing that I don't have enough time to do so. All right, 7th density, beginning of it. We are looking at the oversoul as a whole. Now, the 7th density is the most interesting because it has the most levels. There's several steps to the 7th density. The first level is oversoul. That's all the fractals combined. The second level is what we call soul groups. And this is where many oversouls connect to each other. And then the third level is pretty much it's all the oversouls to one planet combined. So basically, as you see all the oversouls on Earth. Now, Treb told me something that was kind of amazing. He said that there's 144,000 souls, oversouls, that are of the collective consciousness of Earth, and each one of them was a twin soul. And this twin soul is a representation of a ability to have exact parallel existences being played out in different ways. So they're like a standby soul that's the exact replica of the other soul. So there's actually 288,000 out of the 144. And this is what makes up the whole collective consciousness. That's the end of the seventh density. And when the seventh density being manifests itself out into our physical reality, you see it as a whole planet. That's the high seventh density entity. I got a message here. One moment, I'm going to check the message, and then we'll get to the eighth density being. Yes, now, when we go to the eighth density, this is the last point of true individualism or singular consciousness. When you reach the eighth density, this is the last point that you'll see yourself as being an individual. This is collective consciousnesses of all of the planets combined into one, and that is the star. It manifests itself out as a star. This is every planet has their own collective consciousness. It has their own high seventh density entity. You put all those together as the eighth, and it manifests itself physically as a star, but it contains consciousness. Now, every step above this is just smaller consciousnesses added together to make a bigger one. The ninth density is parts of the galaxies where the physical ascension is possible. So this is basically the middle of the galaxy. This is where the ascensional energy comes from. This is the very center. Most of them say they're black holes, but they're really a ninth density entity sitting there. That gives all ascensional energy to the whole entire galaxy as a part of all the eighth density entities, all the stars in that galaxy. They combine to make the ninth density. The 10th density is everything in the entire galaxy combined into the 10th density entity. The 11th density entity, this is an entire universe. Let's talk a little bit about universes. There are literally infinite amounts of universes. Most people think of universe as different places with different planets, kind of like ours, but there are tons of those too. There's a bunch of them that look exactly like our universe. But the problem is, most of them, or not most of them, but there's a bunch of them that have systems that we don't even understand. Some of them, Aridif gave examples. All systems are made with love and light. That's love and wisdom from the Creator as it's broken down. And each system has that, but every other rules are different. We have our own rules and regulations in our universe as gravity, strong and weak nuclear forces, electromagnetic. Those are the rules of our galaxy. Those are the setup. We have galaxies, we have star clusters, we have planets, all these different kinds of consciousness. But one other universe won't look nothing like ours, not just in a soul level, not just in a vibration or evolution level, but literally, it won't look nothing like. It's only made from sound waves. One of the universes I experienced when I hooked to that higher density entity was a completely liquid metal universe. The stars were made of liquid metal. Even the empty space between was like gaseous particles of liquid metal. The people walking on the planets were liquid metal. Everything was. And the stars, planet system, human system, all that doesn't even exist in most universes. Some universes are just, like I said, sound waves, or some are light beams, or some are a bunch of magnetic energy pulled together that wobbles around, and that's how their evolution in that universe is. And our universe, as an entire universe, at the entire 11th density being will go through its entire evolution. It will be born. And how these consciousnesses are born is there's consciousness being done with one universal system ready to enter the next. But physically, through the physics of it, two universes. Let's say there's an entire pool full of bubbles, and two bubbles touch each other. That touching of it creates a new bubble. When that bubble's born, that consciousness that died from the bubble that popped above it shoots right down, and it starts this new incarnation. And every time they start a new incarnation, they start from scratch. They can do whatever they want with it. They choose the rules, regulations. Those 11th density entities are what most of us think of as God, what created our universe, what created the system, the way we evolve, everything. The 11th density is our God almost. Now, as much as I'd like to really dive deep into this, I thought I had more time. Maybe I shouldn't have talked about it on my personal story as much, but I really believed I had a lot more time than I do. The 12th density is the creator brain. They call it the God brain. This is a centralized system that connects all of those 11th density entities to the creator. So it's almost like it has to go through a filtering system. And that's why they call it the God brain. Every entity from 11th density has to connect to this God brain to go to the creator. And the creator is the sum of everything that we know about. Every first density through 12th density being is the creator. And that's what I think is so wonderful about the totality of every, and think about how huge that has to be, literally. It's not a finite deal, it's an infinite idea. It's an infinite amounts of probabilities, possibilities, infinite amount of systems, dimensions, universes, everything. And that infinity's totality becomes the creator. And I think that's such a beautiful concept. It's such a beautiful idea to know. If any of you know how big we are just in this universe, just in this galaxy, how small we are as humans, it's amazing to think. Aridif juggled a few ideas around about the creator being one creator of layers of many creators. He said that there's a possibility that our whole system as we know is one cell. Like in our body, we have all these trillions of cells that make us up. One cell is our universe and the entire body of God. Literally, there's so much. And before I start taking questions, I want to read you this little excerpt from the book because it goes along with what I'm saying about the entire size of this universe. Okay. All right, here we are. And now that you see that, okay, let's see. When you see through the evolution that you're at the bottom of such a long list of various makeups, universes, consciousnesses, sometimes humanity tends to be very upset, or maybe you feel like you're intimidated. But I want you to understand, I want the complete opposite from this. This is the way that it is meant to be experienced. This is the way I want you to feel in this excitement. But when you feel the way of loneliness, it does not benefit in your growth. I do not want only to show you the greatness of the universe, but show you how great that you truly are. I want you to feel the same way, or I want you to feel a way to see yourselves that you're truly a part of all of this. It is the best way to see this. If you know that you are a part of one, that part of all that is cannot be full without you, then you can see the ease of these feelings. I know humanity has these feelings in a very great way. It is from the top down, and you see that. That's the reason I started here, and he's talking about starting from conscious. Let me find the real part. Basically, the whole concept is that we live in a huge place. We live on a small planet and out in the middle of nowhere in a galaxy with billions of stars. And this galaxy is billion, one out of trillions and trillions in just our observable universe. And our observable universe is literally a small fraction of what truly is our universe. And that universe is one amongst millions and trillions and billions of local universes, and it's truly infinite. And when we see how big that is, we see how big the Creator, we often feel insignificant. We feel small. We feel unimportant. But he's trying to say that don't do that to yourself. That all exists because we are part of that. Without us, we couldn't have that. Most of those systems we will never experience fully, truly, until we go back to oneness completely. And I'm not talking, most people say you're completely at oneness in the 9th, 10th density. That's great, and that is somewhat true, but the true oneness is back to the Creator. So most of those things we won't even experience. And if we do, the oversoul concept will be completely null and void, and we won't be in the system any longer. To get to that kind of oneness, a lot of us, it'll take very long time, or it won't take long times because the time perception, the way we see it. But basically let go of all that worry and frustration of how small you are and enjoy your own reality. Everybody's put here so we can experience one more portion of reality. And when we go back to that oneness, our help to show them that part of reality is going to be the same to all these people who have showed us other parts of other universes, other time periods, other existences, other realities. And when we all go back to one, we're all going to have that capability to connect to those parts that we didn't get to experience. And that will be the big payoff for a lot of us. A lot of us want that. It's funny when you hear teachers who are connected to these higher sources of information always talk about, even in those places where you feel like everything you ever wanted is achieved, the afterlife where everything's or a lot of things are available to you, or higher non-physical existences, you still want to experience more. Because everything is available, there's never something that you can't experience. So even when you're a high 7th density oversoul and can just touch another oversoul energetically and know everything that they've experienced, and so on and so forth, and you've done it with all the oversouls in your area, there's still be more things. It's never ending. It's eternal. And there's always new experiences to be had. That's what I wanted to share to you. All right. I know we're getting a little shorter on time now. I'm going to check a couple questions that I was given down here real quick. And then we'll start taking callers. If anyone wants to call, feel free to call. Area code 347-308-8788. Anything you guys want to ask about? Obviously, we're talking about dimensions, densities right now, so preferably if we can keep it on that train of thought. But if not, if you just want to ask anything, please do. Now, someone asked me, can I clarify the difference between dimensions and densities? Well, basically, they have the same meaning for a lot of people, but most people will call a dimension a harmonic level. And that's what we talked about the harmonic levels and densities. Densities, for Treb's race, it's a combination of many things. Some people that define densities separately. Some people will call a density a harmonic level, which is like 1st through 3rd, 4th, and then 5th and 6th. So the definitions are similar. They can be exchanged as much as you want, and most people do. So in Treb's definition, a dimension is the height, depth, width. That's one area of living. In the first density, or in the first dimension, you only experience flatness, like a piece of paper. The second dimension, you experience height and width. Instead of being just a flat piece of paper, it's one that stood up. So you have depth and width. And then you have the third dimension. And the fourth dimension is where we're at. Well, where we were at last year, where we're trying to transition out of. And this is the everyday life that you would know as third density. That's fourth dimensional. Fifth dimensional is everything above third density from 4th, 5th, and 6th in our physical reality. Anything above that goes into the non-physical. And I'm not really familiar with that, but like I said, it's really, really dependent on your definition, and everyone understands how our definitions can make one thing be completely different from one version to the other. So it's really important to place your own ideas on that. And like I said, if you want that graph, if you want that chart, go to Inward Quest, type in Google, Inward Quest, are we moving from third to fourth density reality now? That's the name of the question. I'll put the graph on Facebook too. Anyone looking up, look up Rob Gauthier. It's got the same picture that you'll be seeing of myself in the green shirt. I believe green and white stripe, or green and white and blue stripe shirt that's playing on the Blog Talk Radio website as we're going right now. But I wanted to go in to the studio real quick. We've had one caller who's been on hold for quite some time. I believe she was there when we started, and 360 would make me think that would be Savita. Are you there with us, Savita? Okay. Are you there with us, Savita? All right. Anyone in the 360 area code? Who do we have with us this evening? Okay. 360. Are you there for the call? All right. Well, I suppose the 360 didn't want to chat real quick, but all right, we'll try one more time. 360 area code. Are you there with us? All right, I suppose not. So I thought it was Savita, but maybe it wasn't. If there's anyone who wants to call in, 347-308-8788. I'll start talking about a few more things till we get another call, and that'll be fine. It actually kind of helps me go through a little better. Now, when we go through this evolution of the soul, we're going from first to sixth. That's how we perceive it. Time's linear. And we all understand in this linear fashion that time goes from A to B. It's not jumped around. It's not done by any way, shape, or form. Well, we do have another caller. Aaron Adler would be the name of the caller. How you doing, bud?
What's up? It's been a while since I talked to you. I was so excited to actually make this show.
Oh, man, I'm glad that you did. It has been a while, hasn't it? It's been a couple months now, hasn't it?
Definitely has. I was really excited about the topic you're talking about, and, I couldn't help but notice, at least to me, how you described the densities of consciousness, just how you layered it out in the, 13 layers, how it kind of sounded out like almost like you're describing a fractal in a way.
Sure, and that's how we can look at it too. In all definitions, we are all fractals. If we're not the creator himself, we're a fractal of some sort or a way. And that's how you look at it. I should have really went from the creator down. It would have given a better play out and understanding. But basically, you can take it and revert it both ways. And that's something that Treb described to me, or maybe it was Aridif that said it. Most people go from the bottom to the top, but to go from the top to the bottom is just as valid. And in fact, gives us more ways to identify with things above us as well. So it's real neat to be able to experience it coming both ways,
It's very interesting. I think I remember listening to an old session a few months back with you, and I can't remember if it was Aridif, but once basically he reached the top of explanation of all the densities that they knew of, he was saying that they had suspicions, and I think that's when you were talking about the 13th possibly, that there is, I guess, kind of like an umbrella connecting all those full 12 that are just unaware of other full 12s connected to a 13 or something like that, if I can remember it right. But,
sure. That's the function of the God brain, which is the 12th density entity, is to connect all of the whole universe consciousnesses to the creator and also to each other. So it's like a calling. Like, you remember the old operators, how they ran the switchboard? That's the God brain. It's able to connect all information to the telephone wire and each individual caller to each other and to the wire itself. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's very, very interesting because it's basically just a network of networks, pretty much.
Sure, and some 12 density entities, 11 density entities that are universes, they don't have the layers below them. Like in their own universe, they only have 3 densities.
That's interesting.
Thick sound, medium sound, high sound, or they have hard metal, liquid metal, and vapor metal. I mean, literally, the infinite amounts. Each system is set up differently. This is just how our universal system is set up. This is how the levels of consciousness go. And even in other galaxies, they have the same evolution of the soul, but it's played out differently. Instead of having humanistic versions on the other side of our universe that have little variations, they're all bipedal. They're all entities that stand erect from third density up, but they're always different. Like we have humanoids, insectoids, birds, reptilians, all those. And over there, they've got different forms. Some are carbon-based, and that's even in the same universe. So literally, even each 9th density entity or 10th density entity plays its own rules out. And every time the fractal breaks down, every time the level goes below the one, below it, it also makes its own rules, just as our oversoul. It identifies what it wishes to experience, but it also gives you free will to experience whatever you want. And even if it's an experience that it's already had, it's played through in a different reality, so it still lends validity to the overall experience. And I think that's a wonderful play of the oversoul completely.
That's super, super interesting.
Yeah, this is pretty good, huh?
Yeah, well, so the average form factor across all universes, though, is always a bipedal sapient type form. Then
that's just in our universal.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes more sense to me.
Yeah, because in other universes there are no animals as you know it. Like some universes don't even have planets, galaxies. They have clusterings of, let's say, like one-celled organisms that would be as big as a star, and that's their universal setup.
Wow.
I've seen some that have sound streams, and it's physical sound streams. You can see them. They're like sound waves that are alive, and that's their evolution. So each universe plays its own set of rules, regulations, setups in it, and literally some are so far away from what we can understand because we've never experienced it, even in the deepest science fiction, that we would have no way to physically explain it. We'd have no way to reference it. So literally, anything you could think that's real, like a bunch of spaghetti-looking things could be all wrapped up together into a ball in the middle of their universe, and that's the only one density. It's just literally that vast, and it's so different to each one. And the creator did that on purpose when he breaks himself down into all these 11th density entities. He says, have your experience so I can have them all, I'm part of you, you're part of me, everything you experience, I get. I want to know what everything that could be played out in my creation will happen, and that's how it happens.
That's truly awesome.
It's brilliant, isn't it? I mean, literally, it's your mind can't wrap around the possibilities of all of these different, and most of us call different dimensions where things are different and weird. But even in our system, that's one thing I didn't go into that I should cover too. In our universe, we have 12 different matrices, or 12 different matrices. This is 12 parallel existences to our universe, where things can be as close to it's just like us, but we use our left hand instead of our right, all the way to where Earth is having caveman time still, or 10,000 years in the future, but still on this timeline. So there's like 12 different timelines in the way our universe evolved just in this universe. It's like 12 parallel partners that are all wrapped up into one universal structure. And that's not the same with every universe. Again, each universe has its own rules, regulations, so some don't have any separate matrix. Some might have one gigantic galaxy made of stars with planets around them, and that's it. The whole universe is a galaxy. I mean, it could be anything. literally.
That's really cool. That story, or that explanation, what you said earlier, completely reminded me of this completely mind-bending story I heard of. I don't know if you remember, like, Dolores Cannon, this person who just tries to take people
I've
into.
heard about her, but I up until this last year, I didn't really listen to other channelers, and that was just me saying I need to be clear of preconceived notion stuff. But yeah, I've heard a little bit of her stuff in this last year, sure.
Yeah, she's still not a channeler; she's just a hypnotist. But what you just said, like, there's a story of this tribe that got this weird pterodactyl-like being, and she's trying to figure out why she regressed a person, because this is a person who was related to, I guess, someone in the family who had, had this pterodactyl, and they passed down a story. It wasn't a pterodactyl; it was definitely an alien type thing. But
sure.
They all went hunting one day, and they saw this weird entity, this weird, abnormal-looking animal. And so they're tribe people, so they totally kill it, bring it back home, skin it, eat it. And there's always stories of a chief guy always wearing a piece of the bone or something like that on his headdress. And I think she actually, the person who came into the session actually still had it. And when they're communicating to the higher self, asking what it was, he was describing exactly that the matrix had all to do with the matrices being very closely linked. And also because their perception, or typically indigenous type people have more sixth sense or something, so allowed to have this entity to bleed through into their, I guess, zone of existence at the time to be able to co-interact with it and then kill it, of course. Yeah.
That is amazing.
You just saying that totally blows my mind, because I've heard this elsewhere too. Oh my God.
I see that makes perfect sense too. Most likely that was a bleed through from another matrix, and matrix travel is possible. That's another thing I failed to mention. Going from one matrix to another is possible, but only by sixth density entities in our universe, as well as they can travel from one part of this universe to the other with no time. They can also travel through matrices. And that's what happened with the gray aliens. The ones who run the hybrid programs, a lot of them who abduct people, type 2 entities negative, they have these entities, the ancient reptilians. Those are the oldest sixth density negative entities in our universe as we know, or at least that the Galactic archive is aware of. These entities came in, and they went to a separate matrix. What's that?
Is that the Alpha Draco, I think I've heard before?
Some people do call them Alpha Draco. There are draconian entities that are, but they're very, very old, warlike. So, a lot of the Alpha Draco and the original Earth reptilians, those stories kind of mixed up for what the ancient reptilians really are. And the ancient reptilians did seed a race of reptilian humanistic beings on Earth too. But these are like the oldest reptilian entities. So what happened is they're going through all 12 matrices to parallel existences. Their lot in life is to be dominant. It is to be the top of their line. They don't see that they're part of one, so they believe dominating and ruling others is what's supposed to happen. So they go through this other matrix to a parallel Earth. The same planet, same solar system setup, but it's in one of these 12 matrices. They go to them, and their Earth is destroyed through technology, pollution. They're no longer able to procreate. So they ask these ancient reptilians, we will do whatever you need us to do if you can get us to a race. Every race that they had the technology to get to had DNA that didn't work. Well, obviously, because we have 12 different DNAs in us from 7 different races, we have what they call universal DNA. Pretty much any entity who's in a lineage connection from this galaxy can use it. And they said, we want to get to that. Alpha Draco told them, we know parallel Earth in this timeline, we could take you. And they brought their whole race through the Matrix. But at the cost of that, the gray entities, or the gray, some people call them, are kind of hand in hand with the ancient. And the grays aren't really a bad type 2 entity. They're more of a good kind who are positive. They do care about humans, even though their emotions are pretty much gone. They don't look at us like a bad thing. They look at us as scientific study and a way to procreate their race. And actually, 3 of the 6 or 7 hybrid races that they've made are really, really positive entities, ones who we connect to now. Bashar's race from the Sani people, or the Eshsani, that's one of them, the Angell, the Pleaidian. Those are 3 of the races that were, part of that experiment. And there are also 4 that I know of that aren't. They're negative and they look more like the grays than they do humans, but almost like Vulcans, a friend said, with their lack of emotion, that's beautiful. But I've read, it's very good.
I've read so much. It's really
cool.
So
you've heard that story too then about the grays coming over.
I've read so much. It's actually more so the reptilian type stuff. I had just recently, my dad used to work, I guess it's okay to talk. My dad used to work at NASA on some projects, and he had a friend that worked in Area 51, and we were at a bar, and he got a little tipsy, and I kind of saw as my chance to ask him some alien questions, and didn't say anything about aliens. He said the whole UFO stuff was definitely true, though, but he mentioned something called the Philadelphia experiment, and he only knew about it because he did so many contracts, but projects, and he heard this same horror story that had happened. I guess where they tried to teleport, they used it for teleporting cargo or something, and then they decided to start using people, and that, I guess that's where the story you heard came from. It didn't work out too well. So I researched months over a year, just following every scientist I knew I could validate that my dad knew and he knew, to kind of cross-check. And then I eventually ran into these, it led me to these reptilians, and I never thought it'd lead me there. But, yeah.
Sure. The reptilians hold a lot of the influence in, again, when Treb talks about this kind of stuff, he doesn't talk about it really in a lot of detail because he doesn't want to promote fear, but a lot of those shadow government, Illuminati, whatever they're called, those type of people are in league with the ancient reptilians as well as the grays, and the way they believe is that they can have powers through technology, things like that, and that's what brings them their idea of what power is. So this technology has been given to us for the last 100 years, more than that. I mean, they've had technology for thousands of years, as long as that family line has lived, but they've definitely had connections to these entities, and the more and more technology they give them, the more they use it in other ways. So Philadelphia experiment was one of the first technology gone wrong that was public, but before then and since then, there's been tons and tons of black government or black op or whatever you want to call them experiences where technology has been given down by either the grays or the ancient reptilians themselves, and it's actually it's pretty well documented. People have a lot of information about that, and that's one thing too. I have to say, for all who are listening, who will listen to this, when it gets into those things, a lot of people start getting worried, concerned. They feel as if they're being controlled. But as Treb said a million times, you can't worry about people controlling you because you control your own reality. If you are connected to a negative 6th density ancient reptilian who's really negative, it can never hurt you. It can never take away your free will, because literally you're only co-creating that experience with that entity. You are the main creator of your own reality. And that's why, as interesting as all the stuff is with the NASA's and the shadow governments, Illuminati and stuff, I learned about that because it was necessary, but I never got too much into it because I always chose not to create that reality. And that's why as I live now, I don't connect to a lot of negativity externally. The only thing I always see that when negativity goes on inside me first, that's when I observe it outside. So I just want to say that to everyone who's listening. I appreciate you talking about that too, because it's a very valid point, and it ties right into what we're talking about with nature, reptilians, the matrices, traveling and everything. So I appreciate it very much.
No, I appreciate you even like going further into that. I honestly didn't even know anything about reptilians till I only knew about grays. Actually, even before that, I thought there was just one alien. It was just the gray-looking guy. And then, obviously now, and especially talking about, different types of forms of bipedal humanoid type in this entire universe, I have a completely different perception of what I think other life forms are than just, a gray-looking alien. So it's been a really, really interesting learning experience over the past course of a year, I'd say.
Oh, sure, and learning that information only makes you stronger because it makes you understand, too, what you prefer and what you don't prefer in your own reality, and how that can kind of tie into building a better reality out of the things that are positive, too, that you learn. Is there any more questions that you've got, too, about the density or dimension information that we went over? Because we got about 10 minutes left. And I do want to open up for any other callers who want to call at 347-308-8788. We got about 10 minutes left, so feel free to call. Go ahead, Aaron, with your question, bud.
I actually find that really interesting of how you talk about, I don't mean to go into negative, but it's just very fascinating, the type 2 on higher densities, how when they choose to, you said, love themselves or experience love through themselves, I find very, very, I don't know what a good word for it is, but it's almost kind of beautiful because you're still experiencing love.
Sure.
In the end.
And that's the beautiful part about it. The evolution of the soul allows you to master every part of consciousness, and allows you to master love and safety. It allows you to master reproduction. Every chakra system that we have, every emotion or experience that you could have, the soul allows you to do it to the maximum, and you could do it any way you want. That's the free will, Jill. That's the whole big shebang, and the whole thing is that we can do it any way we want.
Do you know, I don't know if I missed this, the higher 12th, 13th, can those be type 1, type 2, or is that
no,
much
that's
neutral?
only for physical, and that's a good point. That's something I didn't bring up. Once you reach the lower 7th density as an oversoul, your perspective becomes, instead of being 1st through 3rd density can experience positive and negative in the same existence. 4th, 5th, and 6th can only experience one or the other, type 1 or type 2. But when you get back to 7th, it's neither. The oversoul will watch 2 fractals of itself, or 2 oversouls with a fractal from each of them will watch the 2 fractals that they have killing each other and find enjoyment in it. Not because of the death, but because it's an experience. That's their whole motivation, is experience in general. It finds just as much happiness in that murder as it does 2 people showing and living through unconditional love. And that's why I've always tried to explain to people when they tell me, what does Treb mean by there's no right or wrong? Because that's the way of the oversoul. Anything that's higher than 7th, and 7th and 8th density are really the only 2 that experience that neutrality, because everything above that is neutral. It's positive, negative, and neutral. But the 7th and 8th only have a neutral perspective, as in we don't care if it's negative or positive, we enjoy it all. But everything above that is actually negative, positive, and neutral. So it's all things, because it's more one. It's more connected. And even though 7th and 8th are dealing with collectives of energy, they're only coming from a neutral standpoint, and they're happy to see positive and negative, because it's all experience to be fed up, not only for themselves, but for the collective of the oversouls, and also the collective oversouls of the 8th density, and so on and so forth.
I had a little question, too.
Yeah.
I said a few sentences back. Slipped my head. Hold on. Give me one moment.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, like you said that essentially the Oversoul having two portions of itself, killing each other, finding
Sure.
that enjoyment or excitement, I guess you could say. Is that happening within itself, or is this happening within?
Oh, I mean, if let's say you and your neighbor, there's a possibility that both of you come from the same Oversoul. It's less likely than it is from two separate Oversouls, but it can happen. We've only got 288,000 Oversouls in the Earth, so we're bound to run into a part of ourselves. So you guys are killing each other in physical reality, but really the Oversoul sees that as two separate fractals handing experience of what it is to be negative. The Oversoul's mission is to experience all that can be experienced with that experience. That's why they go through incarnation cycles. They start an incarnation cycle. They want to know what it's about to be coalescing rock in a newly formed star system. They want to know what it's like to become a planetoid and then a planet. And then they want to know what it's like to have a moon come out. And then they want to know what it's like to be hammered by asteroids for a couple million years. And then it wants to know about water. And then it wants to know about life growing through. That Oversoul is literally taking the whole experience of what it is to be a planet in its whole entirety. Once the planet Earth itself is destroyed, once it goes, once the sun grows out and eats up our planet, that collective consciousness moves to a different collective consciousness. Then it can either break off pieces of the Earth to go out to it further and create a new planet. It could become a part of the sun, but it always starts its new incarnation cycle. And that's the thing I guess I didn't touch on too. Incarnation cycles are exactly that. Even if we have parts of our Oversoul that are Treb, like I do, he is from a human lineage. His predecessors were the Nihal entities, which were future versions of humans. So I only have that probability because it's still based on the human incarnation. Let's say let's say Earth doesn't die before the people repopulate other planets, which is the highest probability right now. That new planet carries the Earth collective, but it changes, it mutates because the new planet that they're on has a collective of its own. So those two collectives mix and merge to make a new collective. And that's why the Pleaidian future versions of ourselves are still human. That's why our collective still goes there. That's why the Yit, Treb's race, has that collective, because our race is pulling out and connecting to those collective consciousnesses. So the cycle's not done until it's all done, until every trace of humanity is gone. And then all of our souls reunite as oversouls or collective high seventh density entities as one entity with multiple oversouls, and we restart a whole new incarnation cycle. We see a new star being born in a star factory or a nebula, and we say, hey, here's a new star coming, time to start a new life. We'll start this planet here. And then it goes all over again. And it repeats until this universe is dead, and then we readapt to the new universal life. We don't have to stay with this universe as it dies. When this universe dies, we can go to another universe as a high seventh density, as a collective oversoul, but we always experience what we want as a part of the lower parts of the part that made us. It always goes from top to bottom. It always goes from larger to smaller, and then the smaller delves out smaller, and those smaller delve out more smaller, and then it becomes, then when we all die or reconnect, it goes all the way back up. And that's the beautiful thing of this. It's a cycle, and it's perfectly made, but the cycle as we know it will die when the universe dies. And I hate to do that, Aaron, but that's it for the call, bud. I've only got 3 minutes left.
No, it's all
enough
good.
to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you very much, Aaron. We'll talk to you soon, bud.
Yeah, anytime.
All right, have a good day. All right, everybody. This has been a wonderful night. I appreciate all of you for joining in, calling in, checking in. I think there's been a lot of useful information brought out here. I don't know how well you guys enjoyed it, but it gives you an introduction of the very tip. And I think I'm going to have to make a part 2, because as much as I was able to convey in 2 hours, it is not the tip of the iceberg. There's so much left unspoken about And as disappointing as that possibly is to myself, I hope that you enjoyed the parts that I was able to elaborate in the time that I had to elaborate them. And that's why I enjoy the calls, too. Maybe we'll do a part 2 of this somewhere down the road here pretty soon. And if we do, the more callers I get, the more parts I can think about, and the more information I can send out. I gave you all the basics tonight. So let's say this is Density Masterclass 101. And we'll try for Density Masterclass 201 later. See if you guys want the more advanced version of that, too. But there's so much more information to give out. And that's the problem. This is such a large system. Consciousness, souls, the way everything works is a beautiful symphony of so many different types of consciousnesses molding with each other, breaking apart into smaller pieces, and coming back up. It's just a wonderful, wonderful existence we live in, and I'm so happy to be a part of it. I'm so happy for all of you who co-created this event with me tonight. I'm going to continue to try to do as much pre-events as I can like this with information that you guys want to hear. So please hit me up on Facebook, Rob Gauthier. That's G as in guitar, A-U-T-H, T as in tiger, H-I-E-R. G-A-U-T-H-I-E-R, Rob Gauthier, on Facebook. Connect to me. Send me what you want. Also, the Rob and George Enlightenment Evolution Hour. We are here every Wednesday. We talk about anything that you want to talk about. You want to talk about densities and dimensions next Wednesday? Call us up. Anything dealing with metaphysics, we'll talk about. Call us at area code 347-308-8788. And that is the Rob and George Enlightenment Evolution Hour every Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time, 6 p.m. Pacific. We're there every Wednesday. I love you guys so, so much. Thank you guys so much for being here as a part of our show. This is Rob Gauthier. And if you want to check out the website for Treb's information, that's www.trebchanneling.com, TREBCHANNELING, trebchanneling.com. Thank you guys for coming today. I love you guys all so much, and we'll see you Wednesday at the Rob and George Enlightenment Evolution Hour. Love you guys. Bye.